What is going on, guys? So I was actually in the middle of working on the R32 and I thought, you know what, let's make this a video because I can't find a whole lot of information on it apart from forums, but I learn better through visuals, so hopefully I can fix the issue and hopefully it helps you if you're having the same issue with your R32 or your RB20. I think the big thing here is that I really need to order a standalone ECU like ASAP because I want to ditch the MAF because I think that's the issue, but we're going to try everything else except the MAF because I don't have another MAF. And with that ECU, I can plug in my laptop and I can monitor everything. So that's going to come pretty soon. I'm not sure when, hopefully in the next month. So I want to preface this with, this car is a 30-year-old Nissan, which means it's going to have problems. I knew that going into this. The reason I stuck with the RB20 is because I'm so familiar with the RB20 because of my 240, and we have all kinds of spare parts. Like I have a spare whole motor back there that's been rebuilt, along with some boxes of spare parts too. So it's not like I'm starting from fresh and not really knowing what the hell I'm doing. So basically what's going on is that the fuel pump, when I replaced it, caused my alternator to go out. At least that's what I'm going with. That's what I think happened, unless the alternator was already on its way out, which, you know, that's possible. So I replaced the fuel pump, everything worked good, then the alternator went out, and then in the last video, we replaced the alternator with the one that's in my 240 that's actually an LS1 alternator. Everything seemed to work pretty good for a little bit after that, but then the car started like acting up, like almost like going into limp mode. For a while I was just like, oh my god, it's probably the MAF. This is so dumb, and I was at a quarter tank of gas and I thought that was enough. So I was troubleshooting it with a quarter tank of gas and I just couldn't figure out what was going on. So I literally took all the intercooler piping off, put it back on because I thought maybe there was a boost leak because it would get to like 4,000 RPM and then it just wouldn't rev any higher, which is what limp mode does. Because it runs off a MAF sensor, not a MAP sensor, if there is air that has already been measured by the MAF and it escapes the system, like if you run a non-recirculating blow-off valve, it's going to run rich for that period of time because the ECU still thinks that there is enough air in there, so it's going to add more fuel, so that's going to make it run rich. If you have a boost leak, then that could cause it to run rich potentially. At least that's what my thinking is. That could be wrong. But I was thinking that maybe it just wasn't getting enough fuel because I could rev it up not under load, like in neutral. Sometimes it would go to red line, sometimes it would only go to 4,000, sometimes 5,000, sometimes 3,000. So I thought, okay, maybe it's just not getting enough fuel. So filled up the tank, car ran perfect. The car had never run that good before, so I thought, okay, then there was an issue with fuel. Something's clogged and we're not getting enough fuel in once we get to the lower levels of the gas tank. So I thought, alright, let's replace the fuel filter because that's probably clogged. You can use a 1996 Infinity J30 fuel filter. It's a direct swap to the R32. They're the same size, but the fitting's a little different. The 32 one has like a 90 on it and the J30 is just straight on both ends. It does work. You have to get like as much slack as you can in the fuel hose, but it will work. So we have a brand new filter that's not clogged, everything is perfect on it, and the car continued to run great. Even this morning when I drove to work, car ran perfect, no issues, nothing, everything was great. I'm at 3/4 of a tank right now. On the way home from work, for most of the way, perfect, no issues. Then it started going into limp mode again. I could like try to rev it and nothing would happen. I could floor it, RPMs would stay at like 3,500 or 4,500 or 2,000, and then I would go into neutral, the car would rev all the way down to like 400 and then it would go bounce back up to like 1100 and then I could rev it again. So that's leading me to think that it's the MAF, but I want to check other things first because I can't get a MAF right now. There's no MAFs for sale near me. I just can't get a MAF and I really need this car to work. So that's why I need to go standalone ECU and get rid of the stupid MAF sensor because MAFs are so annoying, they're so dumb, they're not an efficient way. They're just there's nothing good about having a MAF sensor versus a MAP sensor with modern technology. It's just, there's no reason to stay MAF sensor. Especially now with standalones getting cheaper and cheaper, you can get an ECU master ECU all in with all the sensors and everything for $1,000. There's just no reason to stay MAF, and I really should have bought this sooner, but I was buying other parts for it because, you know, this car again is 30 years old. It's gonna have some things break, so there's gonna be some issues here and there. I just want to replace all the 30-year-old stuff so I can just avoid all of those issues. I guess one good side about this is that I didn't buy a GTR because if I had these same issues with the GTR, it'd be a whole nother story and the car would have to be sitting down until I could afford to buy all the parts for a GTR, because Skyline tax is ridiculous. I think it's worse than super tax, and super tax is pretty bad. For some reason, people think that because it's a Skyline, things can be more expensive, they can charge more, and it's very annoying. So I took the fuel pump out because I wanted to see if the filter on the bottom was all like rusty, or there's still a bunch of area where fuel can pass through it. So that isn't the issue. What I'm thinking is that maybe it's something with the stock wiring. Because this pump flows more, it is demanding more power. So I think that maybe the stock wiring just can't handle it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wire in a separate relay, run new wire up to the fuse box. We have an empty slot in the engine bay fuse box, and I'm going to use that in order to get the fuel pump some power. And I'm going to have that be on a relay, and then from there it will go to the fuel pump. I'll use the stock power wire back here to activate the relay. From there it'll run off a separate line, a thicker, I'm probably going to run 12 gauge wire all the way to the fuse box, and that should make it to where all the stock wiring is doing is clicking over the relay. And clicking over a relay doesn't take a whole lot of amperage. In theory, that should take all the strain off of the stock harness, so we shouldn't have any issues with the pump, and that should allow the fuel pump to run and not be starving for power. Because it seems like when it happens, the fuel pump starts like making a weird noise. It's not a consistent like hum. It's more like breaks in between. And at first I thought it was like an exhaust leak, but when I step out of the car, I don't really hear it anymore. So I'm thinking that that noise is the fuel pump. So I'm gonna work on that. I have to take this off because I didn't put the clamp on, so gotta take that off, put the clamp on, and then remember to put the clamp on the other side so I don't have to do that again. And then I will start the wiring and everything. So this is the relay that we're going to use. We use these also for the headlight harness. Basically, the black is going to be our ground. The white is going to be wired into the existing fuel pump power wire. So when the ECU sends power to that wire, it is energizing this relay, which will then cause the circuit to close between the yellow and the blue wires. This blue wire is going to go to our new wire going up to the battery, and this yellow wire is going to go to the fuel pump. Once we get power on the white wire, it's going to energize the relay, which is causing the circuit to close, which is essentially just like that. It's completing a loop. All the relay is a switch, and it doesn't take a whole lot of amperage to energize a relay, so that should be easier on the really old wiring. And we're going to run 12 gauge wire up to the battery, so that should be more than plenty to handle this fuel pump, because that's what I've got on my 240, and it runs with no issues. So that noise that you heard was the relay clicking over, so we know that's working. All we have to do is hook up this wire to our battery, and then we can plug it back in and we can test the fuel pump. I know that I said the blue wire is going to go to the new wire and the yellow is going to go to the pump, but with the way that this is set up, it doesn't matter which wire goes where because it's just closing a circuit, so it's just allowing power to travel from one wire to the other. I'm feeding the wire through. We got it one end in the engine bay, and this other end we're trying to get to the trunk. We have to take the back seats out, and all you have to do to get the bottom part of the seats out is there's one hole there and there's one on the other side. Just take like a pry bar or a screwdriver or a wrench or something long, get it under there, and then pull up, and then you'll hear a click and it'll release. You do that on both sides, and then that part just comes out. On the top part you have to undo this bolt and one back there, and then kind of like push the seat up, and then it'll come out. It's not really too hard, and then we have access to the trunk from there. Alright, let's turn on the car and see if we hear the fuel pump prime. So I found a problem. There is something wrong with this ground wire in the factory harness, which might explain the entire issue. So we're going to take this ground and we're just going to ground it to this bolt, because if I measure from the yellow wire to this bolt, I get 12.7 volts, and I'm getting the same thing at the battery, so we know this is a good ground. Okay, so we ran into a little bit of a problem. I hooked everything up, and then we started blowing fuses in the dash fuse box for the fuel pump. That blue slot in the left corner, that is where that relay goes. That's for the fuel pump. The top right pin is the pin that goes back here to the actual pump that feeds it power. That is what we have our white wire going to. So I put this red wire in because I wanted to test continuity so I can make sure that that's the correct wire. And it is. But then I was like, sweet, so we can use that wire on this side, tap into it, and just run it straight to the ignition to just bypasses, so the pump's just on all the time, like how it is in my 240. But then I had to make sure that the short was not between here and the pump. We have one of our leads to the multimeter in the fuel pump wire. We put it to ground, and we have continuity, which means there's a short somewhere between there and the fuel pump. So now, what sucks, I wish I knew this beforehand, what we have to do is run a wire from here to there. So we have to run a second wire. So that's just awesome. But that could be good news because we can tap into the wire on this side and then just have it run off the relay again. So it wouldn't be on all the time, it should run normal. But that could be my entire issue, is that there's a short somewhere in the fuel pump harness, and that's what's causing the car to act so weird. Problem fixed. We have this temporary setup. Turn the key to on. You guys hear that fuel pump? So it's now wired to where the key is in the on position, the pump will be running. So the pump's just always going to be running. That's how it is in my 240, and my 240, I have no issues with that. So now we can tuck the wire through the car, make everything look good, and then we can go for a drive and make sure everything is performing the way that it should. Alright guys, so it is the next day and I think I found the issue. So like I showed you guys, we have a short between the fuel pump fuse and ground. So what I ended up doing is I took the ECU out. So we have it just sitting here. Pin number 18 is the fuel pump relay. So I took my meter and I measured from there to all the grounds on here, all the sensor grounds and the main ground for this. No continuity. It's telling me it's not the ECU shorting to ground. I narrowed it down to this plug, and specifically this black and red wire. If I unplug this plug, no continuity to ground. If I plug it back in, we have continuity to ground. So I believe that it might be in this actual fuse box assembly, and I think that it was because of how we had the fuel pump, we didn't rewire it. But it's nice we finally are getting somewhere, so hopefully once we figure this out, then we can get it going. But one thing that I learned when I had the ECU plugged in, we were getting codes 21 and 34. Code number 21 is the ignition circuit, but I think we're getting that code because we have the LS2 coil packs and we don't have the stock igniter anymore. And code 34 is NOx sensors, which could be my issue. Our sensors could be going out. So I have some spare sensors on this motor here. I'd have to test them to see if they're any good, but I really don't want to replace the NOx sensors because it's such a bitch. I'd have to take the intake manifold off to do it. So good news and bad news. Found the problem. It's our fuel pump. I will show you guys in a second, but we have it suspended in the gasoline right now. So when we turn the power on, it should start pumping gas out of the hose at the top. And as you'll watch, nothing's gonna happen. See, gas should be coming out of here right now, but it's not. No matter where I put it, we don't get any gas coming out. So this fuel pump is bad. I ordered it from Amazon. I just filled out all the return stuff for it, so they're gonna be sending me another one, and then we will return this one. Okay, so I just learned a big lesson. Do not trust everything you read on the internet. The pinout that I went off of to wire in this relay is what caused this entire problem. That is how the short started. That is why our fuel pump isn't working. I'm so disappointed in myself because I shouldn't have been so lazy, and I should have just taken this off so I can see the wires on the other side to see exactly where they're going. I didn't do that though. I thought, let's just look on the internet and let's see what the forums say. This blue wire here is our negative for the fuel pump. That goes to right here, which goes to this white wire. That white wire I have wired in as power. The wire that we thought our ground was, this black with yellow, and that is the power for the fuel pump. So we were energizing the ground, so that is how we were getting a short between ground and power. So now I have to rewire all the stuff that I originally rewired to get it back to original, and once we can confirm that it's working, I need to cancel the return stuff for that other fuel pump and throw this pump back on the 240. We're going to try and start it and we're going to see what happens. Would you look at that, the car's on. Wow. All of that headache was because of that stupid diagram that I followed. Oh my god. Alright guys, so I am genuinely happy right now because I have been pulling my hair out for the past 2 days with no idea what the hell was going on. Let this be a lesson to you guys. Do not trust everything you see on the forums, especially because all the forum information is like 10 years old on these cars at least. It really screwed me over. So when it comes to wiring, always make sure you have the power and the ground in the correct spots, because that is how you get a short when you swap them. So now I'm just gonna let the car warm up just because I'm just like so relieved that it's running. I want to keep it running. So I actually filmed a whole section talking about how I think it was the AAM pump. I actually put in a request to return it and Amazon was sending me a new one. I canceled all that. I'm not gonna show that footage because there's just no point. Basically what happened was the power and the ground were switched because the forum that I went off of used the same color wires. He just switched the power and the ground. So that is how the short happened, that is how everything happened, and it was just a huge mess. So right now the fuel pump is just set to when the key turns on, the fuel pump will be on. I'm gonna leave it like that because that's how my 240 is. We have no issues, and now the fuel pump is on a relay that's got its own power coming straight from the battery, and it's fused. It's on a 15 amp, I believe, which is the same as the fuse that I got on my 240. So now we can put the car back together, and I can put my 240 fuel pump back in my 240s. Oh, and I think I figured out what the issue was where it was going into what I believe was limp mode. I think it's the knock sensor because we got that knock sensor code on the ECU. I feel like that's the issue. Even though now that the ECU says that everything's fine, I think we're still gonna have the issue. So what I'm gonna do is actually bypass the knock sensors with a resistor, which some people might say that's stupid because then how are you gonna know if the engine's knocking? I have a whole spare RB20 right here that's been rebuilt. I just have to clean up and then swap everything over if I really needed to. So I'm fine. So worst case scenario, we end up doing that. We'll do that for now and we'll see what happens. And once we get the new ECU, we'll hook the knock sensors back up and we'll see if it's doing the same thing. If it is, then we can assume that it's the knock sensor and we can go from there, either replace or we can bypass them again. But for now, I'm gonna bypass it because it's just getting so annoying driving like that. So I put the R32 back together and I put the pump back in the 240. So both cars are good to go. Except tonight I'm going to order an alternator and alternator bracket for the 240, so both of my cars will be running LS1 alternators. So that is going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like if you did. Comment down below, let me know what your most frustrated car problem has been, and then hit that subscribe button. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.